In the first 3 episodes of 7 Amazing Tales of the Philippines, I described my impressions and experiences on my first trip to the Philippines back in 1999. Today we take a leap in time to 2003. My Filipina wife and I were in the 3rd year of a marriage that would last for 14 years. When I married her in 2000, I knew I was marrying into a poor family. Therefore, I decided, rather than throwing a big wedding party, to use the money to buy my in-laws a multicab. Multicabs are small vans, mostly Suzuki Carry, that have been converted to a little bus that seats 14 people, including the driver. It's a smaller version of the jeepney, which is a very popular means of transportation in the Philippines. The deal was that my parents-in-law could use the multicab the whole year through to generate some extra income, but when we were there, the car was mine. That gave us the mobility to go on excursions without depending on public transport. This story begins when we were leaving on a day trip with the whole family to the white sand beaches of Padre Burgos in the southernmost part of the island of Leyte. I parked the yellow Suzuki in front of the house where my wife's sister was living with her husband and 2 children, only to be informed that they wouldn't be joining us on our trip. Her husband's uncle had passed away during the night, and they would have too many things to take care of. After condoling the family, we left on our trip without them. When we returned late afternoon, I stopped by their house again to ask them when the funeral would take place, so we could pay our respects. To my great surprise, the answer was, "It's finished already." The man was found dead in his bed at 9 a.m. and at 4 p.m. his body was underneath the ground. Later, my wife explained to me what happens to poor people when they die. When I tell you this story, I am sure that you will be just as baffled as I was back then. You see, if you have money, you can have as nice a funeral in the Philippines as you would get in the West. But poor people don't have money to avail the services of an undertaker, so they must do everything themselves. Of course, that means that they cannot store the body in a freezer, so they have to bury it before it starts smelling, which doesn't take long in Philippine temperatures. As soon as they saw that the uncle was dead, they went to get a doctor to confirm his passing. With the death certificate duly signed by the doctor, they went to the city hall to write him out of the civil register. Then they went to buy a cheap coffin. Filipinos who are even poorer just make a coffin themselves. The uncle had died during the night and was only found in the morning, which means he was stiff and his legs had to be broken to fit him into the coffin. Normally the undertaker does that in all discretion, away from the family. In this case, the family had to do it themselves. Hard to imagine for people like you and me, isn't it? In the meantime, some family members had gone to the cemetery to ask where they could bury him. When a spot was designated to them, they started digging the hole themselves with shovels they had brought from home. If they still found some bones while digging, they were told to just throw them aside. By the time they got back home, some other family members had fetched a priest. When everyone was ready, they took the coffin on their shoulder, and the procession walked on foot from the house of the deceased to the church, where the priest said a few prayers over the body. Then the coffin went back on the shoulders, and they continued their procession up a steep incline to the cemetery. There the coffin was lowered into the ground, the family closed the hole, and the funeral was over. 7 hours after the uncle had been found dead, he was underneath the ground. That's how poor people are buried in the Philippines. R.I.P. Rest in poverty. As you can see, it was not without a reason that I entitled this series 7 Amazing Tales of the Philippines. I'm sure those of you without prior knowledge of the Philippines were quite amazed hearing a true story like this. There are 3 more amazing stories to come, so stay tuned to my channel. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of Home Base Belgium. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. My name is Paul. See you again next time.